Sometimes the scariest things are not ghosts or monsters. They are real people, people who can watch you, people who can hide just out of sight. This story is about a man named Davis, who lived alone in a small apartment. He was a simple guy. He worked a normal job and lived a quiet life. But one day his quiet life became a nightmare. It started with small things. A cup moved from where he left it. The television turned on by itself. At first he thought he was just forgetful. Maybe he was tired. He tried to ignore the strange feelings. He started noticing food disappearing from his refrigerator. Not a lot, just a little bit. A slice of cheese, a single apple, a small carton of milk gone too soon. It was strange. It was unsettling. He knew he wasn't eating these things. He lived alone. There was no one else in his apartment. He started to feel like he was going crazy. Was he sleepwalking? Was he eating in his sleep and not remembering? The feeling of being watched grew stronger every day. He would be sitting on his couch and the hair on his arms would stand up. He felt a cold spot in the room even when the heat was on. One evening, Davis decided to set up a small camera in his living room. He needed answers. He couldn't live with this feeling of dread any longer. He positioned the camera to see his kitchen and his front door. He went to bed that night feeling a little bit safer, knowing the camera was watching. The next morning, he eagerly checked the footage. He fast-forwarded through hours of darkness and silence. Nothing. He felt a wave of relief, but also a little bit of foolishness. Maybe it was all in his head after all. But then he saw it. A flicker of movement in the corner of the screen. He rewound the video and played it back in slow motion. The footage was grainy, but it was clear enough. At around 3 a.m., a small, thin woman crawled out of the cabinet above his refrigerator. She moved silently, like a spider. She opened the fridge, took some food, and ate it right there in the dark. Then she crawled back into the cabinet and closed the door behind her. Davis stared at the screen, his blood running cold. This woman had been living in his apartment, in his walls, for who knows how long. She was his unseen house guest. He called the police immediately, but the memory of her crawling from the shadows would never leave him. I've driven down a lot of lonely roads at night. You know the kind. Dark, empty highways where your headlights are the only thing cutting through the blackness. This story is from a truck driver who had a route that took him through the deserted back roads of Arizona. He had driven this route 100 times. He knew every curve, every dip in the road. It was familiar. It was safe. Or so he thought. One night as he was driving, he saw something strange up ahead. A figure was standing on the side of the road. It was a woman, and she was wearing a long white dress. This was unusual. It was the middle of the night, miles from the nearest town. Who would be standing out here? The truck driver slowed down, concerned. Maybe she needed help. Maybe her car broke down. As he got closer, he could see her more clearly. Her dress was old-fashioned, almost like a wedding gown. Her hair was long and dark. She just stood there, completely still, watching his truck approach. He pulled over a few yards past her and looked in his rearview mirror. He was about to get out and ask if she was okay. But then he saw her face. Her eyes were completely black. There were no whites, no irises, just two dark, empty voids. A chill went down his spine. This was not a person who needed help. This was something else. Something wrong. He slammed his foot on the gas pedal and the truck roared back to life. He didn't look back. He just drove as fast as he could, his heart pounding in his chest. He needed to get away from whatever that thing was. He drove for miles. The image of her black eyes burned into his mind. The desert night had never felt so cold, so menacing. He finally reached a truck stop an hour later, his hands still shaking. He told the other drivers what he saw. They looked at him with a mix of fear and recognition. They had heard stories before, stories of the roadside bride, a ghost who haunts that specific stretch of highway. They say she died on her wedding night in a car crash many years ago. Now she waits on the side of the road for a ride that will never come. The truck driver never took that route again, but sometimes when he closes his eyes, he can still see her standing there, waiting, with those empty black eyes. Our next story comes from a family who bought their dream home. It was an old house, a fixer-upper, but it had character. A young couple, Mark and Sarah, and their 5-year-old daughter, Emily, were excited to start their new life there. The first few weeks were perfect. They painted walls, fixed leaky faucets, and filled the old house with laughter. But then Emily started talking about her new friend, her imaginary friend. She called him the Captain. Mark and Sarah thought it was cute. Kids have imaginary friends all the time. It was a normal part of growing up, but Emily's descriptions of the Captain were strange. She said he was an old man with a scratchy voice. She said he lived in the walls of her closet. He would talk to her at night, telling her stories about the sea. Mark and Sarah became a little concerned. They told Emily that it wasn't nice to listen to strangers, even if they were imaginary. Emily just nodded, but she kept talking to the Captain. One night, Sarah was tucking Emily into bed when Emily said something that made her blood freeze. "The Captain told me where he hid the body," she whispered. Sarah tried to act calm. She asked Emily what she meant. Emily pointed to a spot on the floor in her closet. "He said it's under the floorboards," she said. "He's sad about it." The next day, Mark and Sarah couldn't shake the feeling of unease. Was it just a child's overactive imagination, or was it something more? Driven by a terrifying curiosity, Mark got his tools. He went to the closet and pulled up the old, creaky floorboards in the exact spot Emily had pointed to. The smell hit him first, a damp, earthy smell of decay. Underneath the floorboards, wrapped in an old canvas sail, were the skeletal remains of a man. The police were called and an investigation began. They discovered that the house once belonged to a sea captain who had vanished without a trace over a century ago. It was believed he was lost at sea, but the truth was hidden in the walls of his own home. The family moved out immediately. They could never look at the house the same way again. They never found out who the captain was, or if he was a ghost, or just a voice carried on the old drafts of the house. But they knew one thing for sure: he was real. What makes these stories so terrifying? It's not just the events themselves, it's the questions they leave behind. These aren't tales of werewolves or vampires. They are stories that brush up against the edges of our own reality. They suggest that the world we think we know, the safe, predictable world, is much thinner than we believe. They hint that something else can poke through the veil at any moment. The fear comes from the unknown, the unexplained, the things that have no logical answer. It's the realization that you are not always alone, even when you think you are. Think about Davis and the woman in his cabinet. How long was she there? Days? Weeks? Months? The horror is in the violation of his safest space. His home was no longer a sanctuary. It was a shared cage he didn't even know he was in. The thought that someone could be watching you, breathing the same air as you, just feet away in the darkness, is a uniquely human fear. It taps into our most primal instincts for safety and territory. It's a reminder that the locks on our doors are sometimes just a comforting illusion. True monsters don't always have fangs. Sometimes they just have a key they shouldn't have, or a hiding spot you never thought to check. And what about the truck driver? He saw something that should not exist, a figure that defied logic on a lonely road. Was it a ghost? A hallucination brought on by exhaustion? Or something else entirely? The fear isn't just seeing the figure, it's the doubt that follows. It's knowing that you saw something impossible and no one might ever believe you. It makes you question your own sanity. That moment of seeing the black eyes is a moment where the normal world breaks apart and you get a glimpse of something terrible and ancient underneath. He was lucky. he drove away. But what if he hadn't? These stories stick with us because they feel possible. They happen in places we know. An apartment, a highway, a family home. They prey on the simple fear that one day you might turn a corner and find something that isn't supposed to be there. Or you might hear a voice from a place no voice should come from. The ultimate horror is that these stories are true. They happen to real people. And that leaves us with one final chilling question. If it happened to them, could it happen to me? Thank you for watching, and follow for more true horror stories.